By now, hopefully you've all seen the other videos on the repair of the head and the head gasket on this vehicle. So I thought I'd have a look at some of the costings for the vehicle and for the project, because I know perhaps for some of you it's probably helpful to have an idea how much things cost, how long everything took, and whether potentially this is an option for you or whether you should just buy an already running vehicle if you're looking. So I've broken the purchase items out into different categories. We'll whip through them now. We'll have a look at the total cost at the end, and we'll have a conversation. Well, certainly I will have a conversation about whether it was worth doing or not. Maybe your views will differ to mine, but if they do, let me know in the comments, and we can have a discussion there. So the first purchase obviously was the vehicle. So this is a 2003 L200 for life, I believe, with 94,000 miles on it. And for that, as a non-running spares or repair vehicle, I paid £1,300, which is fair enough, and probably give or take should be the going rate for spares or repairs L200s. Whether that's true or not now is maybe a different story, but certainly a couple of months ago that was the case. As per the other videos, it needed a new head assembly and associating parts. So first off, the head assembly. So I bought this from Lim Engine Components. I'll put the link for all of the parts actually. I'll put links in the video description. So I paid £375 for a complete head assembly, including cam and rocker arms, and that set included the head gasket, the head bolts, and an upper gasket set. So inlet exhaust gaskets and various other bits and pieces and seals. I also needed some glow plugs, as I had an issue with one or two of mine. So 4164 for those, and I needed some consumable crush washers for the injectors, 1150 for those. So belts and timing, it was sold to me with a snapped, well, with a snapped timing belt. It was diagnosed as, but obviously we know that was not the problem. I managed to pick up a new timing belt and balance belt, including both tensioners for £42, which was a pretty good deal, very cheap. So it was a Blueprint branded part. The auxiliary belts were equally cheap at £13.64, so that was just the two smaller belts. The wider ribbed belt looked fairly new, didn't look older than a year old, so that didn't need to be replaced. I probably didn't need to replace the crank bolt, but it's one of those things where it's probably worth ordering it just in case you do need it. And actually I did use this part just because I had it, but I probably didn't need to, and that was £27. So gaskets and seals. So I replaced the front oil seal for the crankshaft as that was leaking slightly at £5.28. I also replaced the cam cover seal, including the half mean at the back and the little seals for the bolts that hold it on at £13.42. So as the head gasket had gone, there was a possibility that the whole of the cooling system had been pressurized and could have been damaged. So while I was in there, because the prices were quite cheap, I decided to replace everything as I went. So a new water pump for £46.75. I managed to get a new radiator for £64.99. Just be careful with the radiators because there are two options. There are two different sizes, so make sure you have the right size for the application that you need. The thermostat was an OEM Mitsubishi thermostat for £19.99. And the coolant temp sensor I had some difficulties finding and ended up getting a temp sensor from Milner's for £28.50. So fluids, obviously we needed coolant. It takes around 8 or 9 litres of coolant, so 2 bottles of those. An oil filter, a fuel filter, maybe you don't need to do that, but while I was in there doing everything else, it made sense to do it. For the oil, it takes around 7 litres, give or take, but check your manual because I can't remember exactly. But I already had part of a bottle anyway, so I only needed to buy one of those. Consumables and tools. So I got a couple of tubes of RTV gasket sealer. So I used Permatex Ultra Black, which is my favourite one to use from preference. You may have your own. And the injector tester that we had to purchase to check the injectors just to make sure. That was $66.97. You might not need it, but even if you wanted to send those injectors away to be tested, it probably would be a similar price. So give or take, that's how much they were. I needed to get some other items just to get it through an MOT. So I needed 2 upper ball joints for the front suspension at $27.01 each. The original battery finally gave out on me, so I had to purchase another one of those at $88.72. I also replaced the fuel feed stack pipes on top of the fuel tank, so that was $36.72. And I managed to get a set of barely used wheels and tyres for £200 and just change those as an assembly. So much cheaper than buying four new tyres as new. Some other parts that I replaced that I had already and didn't pay for, so I changed some sections of fuel hose. I used the AOP assembly lube for the head bolts. I used brake cleaner for cleaning some different parts and some Blue Roll for cleaning surfaces up, parts up, general use. Tools, this isn't an exact guide, but these are the parts, or these are the tools that I used the most. And with these things, you should be able to cover most of the jobs for this. So a 3/8 socket set in metric size, a 1/2 inch socket set in metric, a breaker bar, a torque wrench. You may need 2 torque wrenches. I used 2 different ones, so if you've got 2, would be good, because different things require different torques. So you'll need one that goes up to 200 for the crank bolts, but you'll need some that go down to 20 or 25, 30 for other bolts. So you may need 2 there. Socket extension bars and wobbles just for tight to reach places or difficult sections. The head bolts are a 10mm hex bit. Obviously a set of spanners, pliers, screwdrivers, pry bars, a punch and hammer I used for putting a seal in, but if you've got an appropriate size socket or ideally a seal tool, that would be useful. And a method for cleaning old gaskets off sealing surfaces. So as before, I like to use a Stanley blade, but if you've got a gasket scraper, that's probably a better tool for the job, but I don't. So after all of that, the grand total was at £2,537.70. Whether that is a good deal or not depends on how much these are selling for in a working condition. So I did have a little quick look before this video, and I've come up with these. So you can see the price kind of ranges from 2,700 to 5,000 depending on mileage, age, spec, extras, where it is, who's selling it, etc., etc. So the closest one probably I found is a 2001 For Life for 3,250 with 104,000 miles, so a bit high mileage, a bit older for 3,250. So based on that, we can say we've probably saved around £700 there, give or take. But obviously, it depends what's important to you. If you prefer a newer truck with a high mileage or an older truck with a lower mileage, or what kind of condition of bodywork or paintwork you're willing to accept. But I'm happy with the overall costs. I'm happy with the deal that I've got here, and even if you pay £3,200 or £3,000 for an L200 that's running, is it as good a deal as paying less for one with all new parts, as mentioned previously? I don't know. It's up to you. It probably depends on your level of mechanical competency or willingness to do the job. So diagnosing and fixing this in evenings and lunchtimes and the occasional weekend day, I'd say it took me the course of probably 2 weeks. So in terms of actual hours, it's not that many hours. I'd probably say taking your time with it, it's probably like 6 hours, 7 hours. So not really a bad job at all. But again, if you were to pay someone to do that, certainly you're probably going to exceed the cost of a truck that's in usable order. I hope that's a useful guide for you, and yeah, I hope this helps you, and I hope this helps you make an informed decision.